Let's stick on the content side for one more second. Then I want to talk a little bit about the technology that makes it all possible, because I think that's the arc, right? I mean, I think for any of us that are spending any time in this space, we see the huge potential of somebody with 100 million devices to address, plus content which they can push out. I mean, that's a powerful story. Needs to be stitched together, and let's talk about that in a second. But let's stay on the content side, like I said, for a second, which is this notion of premium content, right? This is one of those words that doesn't really have a definition. How do we understand what premium content is? And I guess the question there being is, in a world where anyone can create content and anyone can do it, quote, professionally. I'm not saying it's all of equal quality, but it can be well produced and it can look like a studio production content. How do you define as a buyer? Let's, Tim, start with you. What equals that premium content? Is it not just what consumers are consuming? Is it the experience? What makes a difference there?
Well, I mean, premium's driven by a number of things, and it is in the eye of the beholder, obviously. So I think it is important. We've known historically, right? So just go back to the old world. We've known from market mix models the relative value of television 30-second spots by day part. That's been known to us for a while, and so in that context, using day parts as a proxy for where the premium stuff lives in our old TV world, we have been able to unpack relative value in a macro context. Obviously, with all of the fragmentation and things changing, what's premium is also evolving a little bit. So, I think it's changing. The answer is not in getting on a fixed definition of what's premium and what's not. It is getting into a better, more granular understanding of what are the drivers of ROI when you take into account the content, the environment, the ad format, the targeting, and et cetera. What are we getting in terms of ROI, and what's the differential value of all those things and their contribution to the performance of the advertising in driving an outcome? That's really more what we're focused on versus worrying too much about getting to a fixed definition of what's premium and what's not.
Well, I think those secondary factors to me, I think, are a lot of what I'm guessing will equal premium. Is it a full episode player, versus an in-stream feed? Again, I have a feeling that that's going to matter a lot. Can you do the right type of targeting?
What's the ad load? I'm a big Hulu watcher, and obviously I can afford to have the non-ad supported one, and it's not just because I'm in the industry. I like paying less. I like the ad loads in Hulu. I like to, and I actually enjoy staying up on the advertising. So it's the combination of those things coming together in an experience, is important.
Yeah. Ryan, how much do you see publishers evolving there? Again, content companies, media companies that are selling video streams. Are you seeing more recognition on the importance of the experience beyond just, hey, we've got a video stream and we're going to put an ad in front of it? Again, whether it's changing of ad formats is a whole other conversation in and of itself. But is there recognition that the experience is going to matter more and more, and that's not just about impressions?
We are. I mean, I think I think this is a natural evolution of any kind of new industry, which is not that new anymore. I mean, you've seen, 5-6 years ago when we were starting to do this and working with broadcasters as they put their over-the-top television out, right? They were over monetizing, I would argue. They were putting way too many ads in the streams at the beginning. We saw it even, worse cases outside the U.S. and even in the U.S. Outside the U.S., you saw some really extreme versions of it. And they have figured it out. And I think, to the credit of a lot of others in the industry, as you have innovation coming from big players like Amazon or Google, people adopt those ideas and they accelerate and they move forward. So I don't think we're there yet. I do think there's some really great work being done by people like Fox around kind of, what is the appropriate ad load and are there different ways to monetize that content correctly? Because, there is the challenge. And I think people do get smarter about this over time, but with, tens of billions of dollars going into original content that wasn't there a couple years ago, funded by e-commerce at Amazon, funded by the capital markets if you're Netflix, that drives up the price of that content, and you have to monetize it. And so it can't be a pure loss leader. It had the luxury of being a loss leader several years ago, where it was just thrown in as part of upfront transactions and things like that. But now they have to find out. So I don't think it's there yet, but I think it's probably 100 times better than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty actually interested by the fact that Facebook too is now commissioning scripted shows, as well as now also has rights to things like MLB.
And if you asked me 3 years ago, I would have said never. You never say never, but I probably would have said never if pressed, because I think they had always been really clear about them as an agnostic distributor, and that's kind of how they play. But I think, as you're seeing for them, they're reaching, and you heard it in their last quarterly results, they're reaching max capacity in terms of what they can monetize in stream. And so they're going to have a growth challenge sooner rather than later if they don't start to figure out other sources.
Yeah, listen, the big dollars are still in this bucket we call television. I mean, listen, I've said for a while, and I know the two of you guys, I know it's what you guys are focused on too, is if we're going to evolve to a world which is ever more driven by technology and data, the idea of addressability and precision, which is certainly, that train's left the station, that's where our industry is headed. We all know it needs to get there, and I think, again, what we're all spending time talking about this week and you know, through our day jobs is the path by which we get there, right? But if that's going to happen and going to be meaningful, then we certainly have to take on where a lion's share of the money is being spent by advertisers, which is this thing called sight, sound, and motion, and often in television. Now, again, and I've asked a bunch, and I won't do it here because there is no definition of TV anymore, right? But it is content that now is living across screens, and it goes to everything that we've kind of talked about is if we want to follow the consumers and make advertising relevant, then we got to go wherever the eyeballs are. Now, the second part of that, which I suppose that's a nice preamble to a question I've now come up with, which is there's a technology side of this, so go back to that, right? And we can make it sound really simple, and I don't want to get too weedy and make it get too complex either, but there is a ton of ad tech in this community right now. Lots of people are stitching together their own stacks with a number of different point products. That doesn't seem very feasible and tenable for the long term to me. It seems to me that in order to make this industry work, we need a certain set of standards and we need some more commonality in kind of the tech stacks. I'll start with you. I mean, certainly that's a little bit self-serving, Ryan, for you guys. You would love to be that more solution set, but I have to imagine you see the pain of where it's many point solutions versus one holistic solution.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the level of intermediaries is the way most of our customers describe it. I mean, the thing that we've seen develop, I think it's highly ambitious, if a bit naive, to think that any one company is going to be the full stack. I think there's, as founders and entrepreneurs, we have to envision that and shoot for that mark, but I think you need to understand that there are always going to be point solutions experts in doing things. I mean, for us, it's all about interoperability. Like that really has become our focus because there always are going to be experts in, creative production or, a new data, targeting approach, and we have to be flexible to that, and that's really what we've got. The thing we generally see in terms of the customers of ours who are doing it right, and this is, big holding companies and big sell-side guys, are the people who are kind of going, we call it native to native, where they're actually finding ways to interact directly. So again, a great example of this is someone like Sky in Europe. Like they have, we're their monetization solution on the supply side, but we also work for Tim's company and many others in that market as the demand side platform. Well, they have an opportunity to exchange media and allow their data to be used by the agency. Now, they're only willing to do that if it's going kind of in a native to native capacity with trusted suppliers on both sides. So we play both of those functions, and that works better than having to be the top to bottom stack for every cable company in Europe or in the US. Sure.
Makes sense. And I think the other big thing which is going from a technology side that's going to accelerate this. It's because I'm on the demand side. It might be weird that I'm talking about this, but I actually think the biggest thing that needs to happen to accelerate change here technologically is on the publisher yield management side, right? Now, I work in an agency. We would love for clients, and one of our goals historically has been to arbitrage information, to have asymmetry in the information. So we can take something they're selling on a demo, optimize it for an audience, get better performance, pay for a lesser value commodity, and turn it into something added value for our clients, right? So that's been the historical model. And we've been doing that since the advent of demos in the 80s, right? We've added data to that to do better optimizations in television. But where it's going now, as we want to transact and trade on those things, publishers are dealing with a very complicated environment because they've got maybe remnant stuff they want to dump to an SSP. They've got premium stuff they want to sell on an upfront traded basis. They've got other things they might want to do programmatic direct, and some of it's on demo, some of it's on audiences. So they're actually in a mixed trading model where, for them to really get going fully, they need to be able to yield manage that. And so actually, the more they can, the more they can advance yield management on their side, dealing with mixed trading, and allowing their sales forces to transact either programmatically or directly, I think that is going to help to kind of accelerate on our side. Plugging into that is relatively straightforward. The reason we're struggling technologically with all these homegrown solutions, we can't live there with all these kind of homegrown point solutions, us trying to help our clients unpack all that and figure out what to do. We've got to get to more standardization, but I think the precursor to that is them going to be figuring out how to manage mixed trading.
Yeah, I agree with what Tim's saying. I mean, I think one of the, and again, this is just as the demand side of the business is going through this quick evolution, the supply side and the sell side is as well. These businesses were set up to sell content as a proxy for audiences. So if you wanted to reach men 18 to 34, put it on the NFL. And that was kind of the way it worked. Well, with the onset of kind of data and true audience targeting, and not just targeting demographics, but other data points, you all of a sudden have these legacy systems, especially within the cable, MVPD, big broadcaster space, which is built entirely on the notion of how do you deliver into content. It was about content rights management, and it was about clash management. And so ad serving in kind of the classic sense was good, really good, enough. But all of a sudden, it's been kind of hit across the side of the face by this kind of onset of true audience targeting, yield optimization, not just about content, but a content plus data plus audience. And that's gotten really complex. So that's what I mean, when I was talking earlier about the fact that kind of the market has come to us in some regard, a big part of it is being an audience targeting kind of platform has been, the inability for traditional ad serving companies to do those things.
Yeah, I think certainly those that have grown up in digital have historically underappreciated the complexity of a television ecosystem, right? It's not simply, serving some video into an open slot, right? There's a lot more complexity, and I think that's being much more appreciated, which I think is allowing this converged world that we're looking for to truly come together.
Yeah, and you see this, right? I mean, I heard at a lunch we hosted a couple of days ago. One of our speakers was talking about kind of the approach that's been taken to television. It's and it's not a surprise, but people take the approach to a new market, the approach they had for the market before, and so. I would argue the grand majority of the people attacking the TV problem, even up till today, have taken the digital display auction-based RTV model and said this is how TV is going to be disintermediated, effectively. And not a compliment to TV. It is the destroy and collect the pieces play. Yeah. And what you find is that, as Tim suggested, it's a heavily upfront traded market. It's traded by a very small group of people around the world. And there is actually a very real benefit to futures trading. It's not, someone said, and I went against it very hard the other day, was that the upfronts will go away. They're an antiquated, unnecessary system. I'd argue exactly the opposite. Content is really expensive. And from a pure cash flow perspective, the CBSs, the NBCs of the world need that money guaranteed to produce the content that people want.
Yeah, and you actually taken me where I was going to go back to the last question, because, listen, not only do the media companies need some guarantees of revenue, and when you're talking about tens of billions of dollars, you're not going to do that all in a non-guaranteed tradable world. It's just not happening. Actually, just as relevant, your clients, Tim, also need commitments, and they need upfront commitments as well. They need access to known inventory, to know what kind of programs they're going to run in and what kind of audiences they're going to reach. Absolutely. You can't do all that in the last minute. That's not how big business runs, right? So, but I think still, and again, maybe this is a closing thought for you, Tim, here is that almost still seems for a lot of people almost a counterintuitive argument. And I don't know, maybe we've made the points, but any closing thoughts on to why you believe that this is so true?
It comes down to the scarcity of the supply and its value in driving marketing ROI. That's it. So the biggest advertisers have the biggest demands. It's in their models. They need it to grow and drive their business. They've learned 100 times in the past. They cut all of that at their peril. And so when you marry that, a real demand, because it's an ROI driver, married with scarcity, that is creating that dynamic, which is it's a valuable dynamic. Believe me, if this was a frictionless RTB style market, the disruption we would all be experiencing, we wouldn't be able to adjust to. It would go faster than the legacy businesses could adjust to. From our perspective, this dynamic has given us the space over the last 4 or 5 years and into the next 3, 4 that we've needed to adjust our business models, our understanding of technology, our application of that. So it's actually a very valuable, it's a very valuable context for us to be operating in.
All right, well, it sounds like we're in for a fun next couple of years. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your camp.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.